They built a sports complex on my land while I was out of town. No warning, no permission, just steel, lies, and a forged signature. They thought I'd stay quiet, but I've got military training proof and a kid with a drone. And now, it's their turn to run. I hadn't planned on coming back early. The cabin in Colorado was supposed to be my escape. 2 weeks of silence, trees, and no cell reception. But on the 11th morning, something itched at the back of my neck. Call it instinct. Or maybe it was just the thought of returning to a property I'd spent over a decade turning into my own little fortress of solitude. I packed up, drove all day, and rolled into my driveway just before sunset. I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked. The oaks were golden, the wind was low, the world felt still. Then I saw the bulldozer. It sat there like a goddamn monument to madness, right in the middle of my back lot, parked where my fire pit used to be. Beyond it, rebar, fencing, construction tape, and piles of steel beams stacked like someone was building a spaceport, not a suburban rec center. I stopped my truck so hard gravel sprayed behind me. Got out. Just stood there staring at it all, trying to process what the hell had happened in less than 2 weeks. My land looked like a war zone. Torn up grass, deep trench lines. They'd flattened the wildflower berm I planted myself 5 years back right after I retired. I walked closer. There was a banner flapping on a temporary fence. Future Community Sports Pavilion, Maple Ridge HOA. I'm not a man who angers easily. I did 22 years in the Army, saw more idiocy than most politicians can spell. But this was something special. I marched straight to the fence and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" From behind one of the prefab structures, a guy in a reflective vest shuffled out, chewing a protein bar like I was interrupting his lunch instead of standing on my own damn land. "You can't be here, sir," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "This is my property." He paused just long enough to be annoying. "You with the HOA?" "I'm the owner of this lot," I snapped. That got his attention. He looked me up and down, taking in the camo jacket and boots, then gave a small smirk. "You might want to talk to the project manager." I might want to talk to God too, but guess what? He didn't build a damn stadium in my backyard. 10 minutes later, I was standing in front of a woman with a hard hat, clipboard, and zero shame. She introduced herself as Rachel, the site supervisor, claimed she had paperwork from the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association authorizing the project. Claimed the land was designated community accessible open space. I told her in clear, slow English that the land belonged to me, Tom Harper, and that I had title deed and survey records going back to 2012. Rachel shrugged. "Look, I just follow permits, maybe talk to the HOA board." I left before I started yelling. My truck's tires peeled out on the gravel as I sped toward the HOA office, which unfortunately shared a building with a frozen yogurt shop and a boutique that sold essential oils for dogs. The office was closed. Of course. Next stop, police. I marched into the station with copies of my deed. Yes, I keep that stuff printed in my glove box like any man who trusts lawyers as far as he can throw them, and explained what I found. The officer, Officer Dean, looked maybe 25 and had the kind of polite tone that says, "Please don't raise your voice so I don't have to pretend to care. Sir, according to this parcel ID, it's been reclassified. The land is listed as part of the HOA maintained zone now." I blinked. "You're telling me someone rezoned my land while I was hiking?" "Possibly. You'll want to file a dispute with the county, civil matter. Let me get this straight. Someone broke onto my property, bulldozed it, and started construction. And you're telling me to go talk to the clerk's office? Unless you have proof of criminal intent, there's not much we can do." I looked at the kid. Really looked, and I realized he wasn't the enemy. He was just the latest in a long line of not my jurisdiction types who'd been trained to avoid rocking the boat. So I nodded, took my paperwork, walked out, and drove home, the kind of calm that only comes when you're so angry your brain stops generating emotion. Back at the house, I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the porch, and stared at the distant floodlights illuminating someone else's dream on my goddamn soil. The next morning, 3 more trucks arrived. One of the drivers waved to me as if I were the caretaker. Another parked partially on my side lawn. That was the last straw. I walked down to the site and told them all loud and clear, "Any of you cross this line again, you'll be talking to my lawyer next. And trust me, he's not nearly as friendly as me." They laughed. One of them said, "Come on, old man, don't be selfish. You don't even use this land." Another added, "The community voted. You're the only one out." That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a hit. A slow, deliberate land grab wrapped in buzzwords and bullshit. And it had been executed while I was hundreds of miles away, disconnected from the grid. They hadn't asked because they didn't expect resistance. After all, what kind of retired army vet living alone on too much land was going to come back early? I took a long walk that night out past the tree line. My boots hit soil that still smelled like pine and freedom. I lit a cigar I'd been saving for no occasion in particular. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts I hadn't touched in years. Rick, Samantha, Mark, Jenna, and just for fun, Ghost. War was coming, but this time it would be my kind. The first call I made was to Rick. He was my former squad leader back in Kandahar, and these days he worked as a real estate attorney with a specialty in property boundary disputes. The man could quote zoning laws like other people quoted Bible verses. I didn't even finish the sentence before he cut me off. "Wait, they built what on your land?" "A sports complex," I said. "Well, the skeleton of one. Steel beams, gravel, porta-potties, the whole circus." "Jesus," he muttered. "Send me your original deed, title history, and your most recent property tax assessment. Tonight. I'll start digging first thing in the morning." I knew Rick wouldn't stop until he hit bedrock, but I also knew we were going to need more than legal paperwork. This wasn't just a clerical error, this was coordinated, intentional. And HOA types don't just get bold overnight. That's when I saw him again. The kid. He was lingering near the tree line, half hidden behind a stump, hoodie up, trying to look casual and failing miserably. Maybe 15, maybe 16. I'd seen him before, skating around the cul-de-sac or loitering by the gas station. Neighborhood called him a troublemaker. One of those latchkey kids with earbuds glued in always on his phone. I didn't pay him much mind until I heard yelling, and it wasn't coming from me. I stepped down from my porch just in time to see a patrol car swing around the corner. 2 officers got out, one of them barking at the kid to get on the ground. He looked terrified, completely frozen. Something about the scene didn't sit right. I jogged over. "Hey, what's this about?" One of the officers turned to me. "You the property owner?" "Yes, and that's my fence he's standing near. What's going on?" "We got a call about an attempted arson at the construction site," the officer said. "Description matches this kid." "Bullshit," I said, louder than necessary. "He's been standing right there for the past 15 minutes. I watched him myself." The officer looked skeptical. "You saw him the whole time?" I locked eyes with him. "You want me to go get the footage? I've got cameras facing both lot lines. Want to check timestamps together?" That changed his tone. They let the kid up. He was shaking, didn't say a word. After the cops left, still radioing someone about unconfirmed suspect, I turned to the boy. "You good?" He nodded stiffly. His name was Elias, but people called him Eli. His voice was soft, almost embarrassed when he spoke. I wasn't gonna do anything, I was just watching. It's crazy what they're building back here. I offered him a bottle of water and motioned toward the porch. We sat. I learned more in 20 minutes than I'd picked up in the last 2 weeks. Eli had overheard stuff, talks between the HOA's secretary and a contractor, things about accelerating development while I was out of town. He said he saw HOA board members walking around the lot at night with maps and flashlights. He even saw one guy with a laptop plugged into a city inspector's car like he was copying something. I asked why he'd tell me all this. He shrugged. They've been trying to pin stuff on me for months. Last summer they said I vandalized a swing set I never touched. I think they just don't like kids like me around here. I nodded. I knew the type. People like Karen always needed a villain. And when I left town, I guess I became the next one. I told him he'd be safer sticking to sidewalks for now. But deep down, I was already considering how useful he might be. Not as bait, hell no, but as eyes, ears. A teenager with a phone and no supervision? That was a security asset. The next day, I went to the county zoning office. They had me take a number and wait under fluorescent lights that made me feel like I was back in military triage. When I finally got to the window, the clerk blinked at me like I'd spoken Latin. "Parcel reassignment?" she repeated. "Do you have a permit number?" "I'm not requesting a reassignment," I said. "I'm telling you someone forged one." She typed slowly. "Looks like the parcel was updated 6 months ago under a Form 96B. Community dedication request." "Who filed it?" She frowned. "Maple Ridge HOA. With my signature on it?" "Looks like it, yes." "And you didn't think it was strange that the landowner wasn't present?" She gave the kind of bureaucratic shrug that should be taught in law school. "They submitted notarized documentation." I stared at her. "You're telling me they submitted forged documents and nobody verified anything with the actual landowner?" "We're not required to verify if the documents are notarized and submitted electronically." That's when it hit me. They were counting on this, on the loopholes, the laziness, the red tape. They hadn't just gambled. They'd planned for me to be gone. This wasn't amateur hour. I drove straight home, threw my laptop on the table, and started digging through my archives. Old scans, property surveys, GIS maps from the assessor's office. I called Mark, one of my old Army buddies who now worked freelance for a zoning oversight group, and asked if he still had access to aerial satellite snapshots. "Still got friends in the sky," he said. "What's the year you need?" "All of them," I said. The next 48 hours were a blur. Rick called with confirmation. The parcel reclassification was invalid, and he'd be filing an emergency injunction. Meanwhile, Eli started feeding me photos from the street. License plates, HOA staff coming and going, even a picture of Karen herself standing in the construction site, pointing at something and looking like Mussolini with a manicure. But that's when it escalated. One morning I found a letter in my mailbox. No postage, no envelope, just a folded piece of paper with 3 typed lines. "You are not welcome here. Your behavior is being monitored. We will protect the interests of this community." It wasn't signed, of course. Cowards never do. I set it down, breathed deep, and smiled. Because that was their mistake. They thought I was isolated. They forgot who I used to be. And they had no idea what I was about to bring down on them. The letter wasn't just a threat, it was permission. Permission to stop playing nice. By the time the sun was up, I'd already called Jenna. She served with me overseas, now worked cyber investigations for a private security firm. If something was forged, she could trace it. If someone tried to bury a file, she could dig it out with a teaspoon and a vengeance. I sent her scans of the community dedication form the county had on file. Less than 2 hours later, she called back. "It's fake," she said flatly. "They used an old notary ID from a woman who died 3 years ago. Digital signature's a clone. Sloppy work, but enough to fool the county system if no one looked closely. And the IP address that submitted it, routed through a residential network, belongs to Timothy Milner, the HOA secretary. Bingo. That was it. Confirmation. These people hadn't just built a sports complex, they'd fabricated an entire bureaucratic lie to get away with it. I called Rick, updated him, and he whistled low. "We've got them by the throat now," he said. "We file a motion for immediate injunctive relief, freeze the construction, then push for criminal charges for fraud and trespass. You think the county will move fast enough?" "No. But I know a judge who hates HOAs more than mold. Let me make some calls." I ended the call and looked out the window at the half-finished monument to entitlement rising on my lot. I'd spent years keeping that land wild and untouched, a buffer between me and the suburbia I never asked to be part of. And now it looked like the early stages of a military base. Steel beams, concrete slabs, orange mesh fencing everywhere. Workers moved with the urgency of people promised bonuses if they beat the clock. That's when I decided to stop reacting. I needed intelligence, surveillance, proof that this wasn't just sloppy paperwork. It was an operation. So I called Sam. Sam had been a drone technician in the service. These days, he ran a pest control business and flew a fleet of agricultural survey drones that were, frankly, more advanced than anything the local cops had access to. Within 24 hours, he'd driven in from 2 towns over and helped me rig up what we called Ghost Watch. We installed micro cameras in the trees disguised as part of an old bird-watching system I used to have. Heat-sensitive lenses, night vision. Each camera connected to a closed network in my basement, feeding into an AI pattern recognition tool Sam brought with him on a portable server. The system didn't just record, it analyzed. We taught it faces, vehicles, behavior flags, trespassing after dark, tools being moved, large gatherings. Sam had the whole thing dialed in so tight that if someone so much as stepped over the invisible property line, the system tagged the footage, time-stamped it, and sorted it by severity. I wanted them on camera. I wanted their arrogance captured in high def with full audio. I wanted their secrets lined up like a firing squad ready for court. By the end of the first night, we already had footage of Karen. She walked onto the site after dusk, clipboard in hand, wearing a sweater that said "Community First." With her were 2 men, one of them HOA board treasurer, the other a guy I recognized from the county office. They spent 20 minutes pointing at areas of the construction, marking spots with spray paint. At one point, Karen laughed, slapped the clipboard, and said, "Clear as day. He's alone. He can't fight all of us." The next morning, Eli showed up at my porch again. He had something new. Photos of a van he saw parked by the back access trail late at night. Same one Sam's drone had picked up. Its plates matched a contractor registered to the HOA's shell company, the one used to funnel funds without board oversight. This kid was gold. I brought him into the garage, showed him Ghostwatch on the monitors, let him sit in the chair like a junior operator. His eyes lit up like I'd handed him keys to the Batcave. "You're like Batman," he said. "More like grumpy old man with Wi-Fi," I replied. The truth was, the system worked better with him helping. He knew where people walked, which fences they slipped through, which neighbors secretly supported the HOA's overreach. With Eli keeping one eye on the cameras and Sam refining the AI filters, we had a real-time map of every movement in and around the site. Meanwhile, Jenna traced more IPs and dug up emails from the HOA's internal cloud. Rick subpoenaed the hosting service. What we found wasn't just a few faked forms. It was coordination. Emails between Karen and the construction company CEO. Promises that the owner won't return in time to stop us. Mentions of campaign donations to a county zoning officer. And the big one, an HOA budget document allocating $35,000 to legal buffering operations. I didn't know what the hell legal buffering meant, but it sounded shady as hell. Then things got personal. One evening I came back from the hardware store to find my driveway covered in flyers, slapped on my mailbox, duct taped to my fence, stuffed under my doormat. They all read, "Stop the saboteur, say yes to progress. This land belongs to the community, not a bitter old man. Attend the HOA emergency meeting this Friday." They even used a photo of me, from service, full uniform, cropped tight to make me look like a lunatic militia type. Beneath it, someone had scrawled in red marker, "He doesn't belong here anymore." That night, Ghostwatch caught someone spray painting my garage. They weren't fast, and they weren't careful. We got the whole thing on tape. I sent the footage to Rick. He laughed and said, "We're about to own these people." But even as I watched the footage again, frame by frame, I couldn't shake the feeling. They weren't just arrogant. They were certain they'd get away with it, which meant someone bigger was protecting them. And that, I realized, would be the next layer I'd have to peel back. The HOA meeting on Friday was the kind of event that made me remember why I'd chosen to live on the edge of town in the first place. People showed up in their weekend best, gripping reusable water bottles and folding chairs like they were heading to a TED Talk. The event was held in the community center, an over-renovated former firehouse that now boasted mood lighting, artisanal hand soap in the restrooms, and an HOA podium that looked suspiciously like it had been stolen from a city council. Karen stood at the front like she was campaigning for Senate, hair perfectly coiffed, blouse red, white, and blue, her clipboard held like a damn sword of justice. "We mustn't let one man," she said, pausing for dramatic effect, "derail a project that benefits every child, every family, and every future in Maple Ridge." Applause. Not thunderous, but steady, manufactured. I stood in the back, arms crossed, unnoticed at first. She didn't know I'd come. She definitely didn't expect what was about to happen. Next to her stood the treasurer, Miles Hargrove, a man with a permanent sweat sheen and a reputation for creative accounting. He passed her a folder like a magician presenting a final trick. Karen held it high. "This," she declared, "is the signed community dedication agreement. We have every legal right to move forward." She clicked the projector. My signature appeared on the screen. Except it wasn't mine. Everyone in that room saw it. I stepped forward. "That's a forgery." The room hushed. Karen blinked, faltered for half a second. "Mr. Harper, I was told you wasn't coming," I said. "That's funny. Almost like you were hoping I wouldn't." I pulled out a thumb drive and handed it to the AV guy before Karen could stop me. He looked unsure, but the silence in the room said, "Do it." The projector screen changed. Ghostwatch footage, time-stamped, high-resolution, audio clear as a bell. Karen, on my property, at night. Karen, "He's alone. He can't fight all of us." Clip 2, Timothy Milner uploading files from a laptop in his car. Clip 3, HOA board members discussing delays with the fake notary license. By the time it ended, the only sound was the hum of the AC. Karen didn't speak. Couldn't. I turned to face the room. "I didn't come here to fight you all. I came back from vacation to find my property stolen. And when I pushed back, I was called dangerous, bitter, uncooperative. But I'm not the criminal here. I'm a man who knows how to defend what's his." Then I walked out. The fallout hit fast. The local paper picked it up that same weekend. "Veteran exposes HOA forgery and land grab scandal." By Monday, it had gone statewide. By Tuesday, a regional news station ran a segment titled, "The Suburban Siege: How Far Will HOA Power Go?" I couldn't leave my house without a neighbor waving nervously or dropping off store-bought cookies with shaky apologies. Half of them claimed they never knew what was really going on. The other half suddenly wanted to help. That would have been amusing if things weren't still escalating behind the scenes. Rick filed for an emergency injunction. We had enough evidence now to argue for halting all construction immediately and freezing HOA assets related to the project. The court date was set for the following week. Then the PR offensive started. The HOA hired a local PR firm, some boutique agency called Vision Bridge, to clean up the disaster. They started pumping out social media posts, press releases, slick videos with music and slow-motion footage of kids playing soccer next to photos of a very unflattering still of me from the HOA meeting footage. One post read, "Should one angry man block our community's future, say yes to progress." Another, "He fought overseas, now he's fighting playgrounds." Subtle. That week I got more stares than usual at the grocery store. Some sympathetic, others confused, a few outright hostile. But the kicker came on Thursday. 2 officers knocked on my door. "Mr. Harper, we're here about a harassment complaint filed by Karen Miller and several HOA board members," the lead one said. I didn't even flinch. "You're kidding. Allegedly, you've been surveilling residents, distributing doctored footage, and making indirect threats." "Indirect threats?" I said. "You mean facts?" They asked to come in. I declined, politely. Rick had prepared me for this. I handed over a printed letter citing my rights, explained the footage was taken entirely on my land or in public areas, and that all materials shared had full timestamps and unedited metadata. I also had Sam on speakerphone ready to verify the surveillance network's compliance with state law. The cops didn't push, but they left me with a warning: keep things civil. I watched them drive off and noticed something strange. A sedan parked halfway down the block, same one Eli had flagged a few days ago. Not a neighbor's, not city. I made a mental note. Inside, I reviewed the footage again, not because I had doubts, but because it was war and I didn't go into battle without reviewing intel. That night, Eli stopped by. He'd picked up chatter that Karen was trying to fast-track construction to get ahead of court interference. Her words. He even overheard talk about using emergency HOA funds to reinforce the build over the weekend. They were doubling down, losing face, losing control, and choosing desperation over retreat. I could have backed off. Instead, I activated Ghostwatch to record 24/7. I told Jenna to dig deeper into Vision Bridge's finances, and I asked Rick a new question. What happens if we prove county collusion? He was silent for a second. Then he said, "Then this stops being civil litigation." And that somehow was the best thing I'd heard all week. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning in the downtown courthouse. I wore my cleanest boots, a dark blazer, and the same watch I'd worn the day I retired from the Army. Rick met me outside with 2 heavy binders, a portable hard drive, and the kind of expression that says, "I've already rehearsed dismantling them in my head 10 times. "Judge Linton's sharp," he said as we passed through security. "Straight shooter. Doesn't tolerate procedural games." Inside, the courtroom was packed tighter than I expected. HOA board members in matching polo shirts, their lawyer in an overpriced suit trying very hard to look relaxed. Karen sat at the far end of their table, arms crossed, lips pressed so thin they could have been drawn with pencil. Rick opened with a blistering summary. Forged documents, unauthorized construction, and a coordinated effort to reclassify private property without consent. Then came the evidence, the forged notary file, the satellite images showing my lot untouched until this year. emails between board members referencing strategic timing, and the ghost watch footage. I watched the judge's eyes narrow as she flipped through printouts of Karen on my land, clipboard in hand, laughing about my absence. There were no interruptions, no objections. Their side stayed oddly quiet. When their lawyer finally stood, his defense was thinner than a Walmart raincoat. Your Honor, this was a well-intentioned miscommunication. The HOA board believed they had community approval, and Mr. Harper's extended absence created a temporary window of administrative confusion. We were under the impression the land was designated for public development years ago. Judge Linton raised an eyebrow. So you're saying the defendant's vacation justified building on his property? Not justified, the lawyer hedged. Merely misunderstood. She closed the binder with a snap. Motion granted. Immediate injunction issued. All construction is to cease. Any equipment on Mr. Harper's property must be removed within 48 hours. Karen flinched. Miles Hargrove looked like he swallowed a golf ball. But the win was just procedural. The real war wasn't over. Outside, reporters swarmed. I said nothing. Rick gave a brief statement, then pulled me into his car and drove off before anyone could ask how it felt to beat an HOA at their own game. That afternoon, the trucks started rolling out. Steel beams, concrete mixers, porta-potties, even the damn banner. All of it gone by sunset on day 2. But then came the kicker. On Thursday, Rick forwarded me a letter he received through the court system. A notice of no intent to countersue Mahone from the HOA. Not just a defense, they were accusing me of damages. Loss of project funds, emotional distress, harm to their community reputation. I laughed. Then I stopped laughing when Rick said, "This part's not from them." He pointed to the last page, new letterhead, much cleaner. Marshfield Development Group. A private investment company. They claimed to have purchased HOA debt 6 months earlier in exchange for future development access to the sports complex. And now they were alleging I'd sabotaged their project and caused irreparable financial harm. Looks like the HOA took out loans against expected fundraising and property value increases, Rick said. And now the developers want blood. This was the second wave. An escalation. Jenna ran a background on Marshfield, quiet but powerful. Owned by a man named Devin Marshall, whose name was attached to over 40 suburban redevelopments across the state. And unlike Karen, he didn't make speeches, he made moves, big ones. I expected a letter from his lawyer. What I got instead was an invitation. Mr. Harper, I understand your frustration. I believe a conversation between men of reason is long overdue. Friday noon, The Nest, Table 4. DM. The Nest was a restaurant near the golf course. Expensive, pretentious, the kind of place where people drank cucumber water and talked about zoning as if it were warfare. I arrived 5 minutes early. Devin was already seated. Mid-40s, tanned, button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves. Rolex that cost more than my truck, and a face that told me he was used to winning lawsuits before they ever reached court. He motioned for me to sit. "I'll skip the small talk," he said. "I didn't know about the forged documents until last week." I said nothing. "I also didn't know your land wasn't HOA common space. I was misinformed. That misinformation cost me quite a bit." He tapped the table once. "I'm not interested in a legal bloodbath, Mr. Harper. You've got evidence, public support, the narrative. I've got money, time, lawyers. So instead of dragging this out, I'd like to offer you an agreement." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, an offer to drop all legal action. In exchange, he would must sue the HOA himself for fraud and breach of contract. He wanted access to certain emails and video materials to support his case. In return, he'd cover my legal costs, make a public statement clearing my name, and fund the restoration of my damaged land. He even offered to plant trees, native species. Full ecological restoration, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I studied him. You're not doing this out of kindness. No, he said plainly. I'm doing it because they lied to me too. I don't work with amateurs. Karen Miller used my firm's name to inflate her leverage. That costs me credibility, reputation, clients. He sipped his iced tea. I want her buried, and you, frankly, are the perfect shovel. I left with the folder. Back home, I scanned it twice, had Rick review it, then burned the HOA's countersuit notice in the fire pit they tried to destroy. Ghostwatch picked up Karen that night alone, standing at the edge of my lot. She didn't say anything, just stared, as if waiting for something to save her. I didn't trust Devin Marshall, not for a second, but I trusted his anger, and that made him useful. Rick reviewed the agreement line by line, and Jenna verified every clause against county records and past litigation Marshfield had been involved in. Devin wasn't bluffing. He had real teeth, and he'd already filed a lawsuit against Maple Ridge HOA in the state civil court for breach of contract, fraud, and reputational harm. It was a bloodletting. Karen and her board were named individually. So were the construction companies, the fake notary's estate, and 2 county employees, one of whom had mysteriously gone on leave the day after Rick filed his injunction. Within 72 hours, HOA accounts were frozen. Contractors filed liens for unpaid invoices, and an anonymous whistleblower leaked HOA internal communications to a local journalist who wasted no time splashing them across the front page. Power lies in private land, the dark dealings behind Maple Ridge's sports complex. It included screenshots of Karen telling board members, "We'll outvote him or outlast him, either way he's just one man. And old." The quote made the rounds online, fast. The public mood flipped. What had once been a quiet suburban story was now a viral symbol of local government overreach. Podcasts ran segments on the Harper case. Talk show hosts took jabs at HOAs. I even got invited to speak at a town hall on property rights. I declined, but Rick went and delivered a mic drop of a speech. And through all of it, I stayed focused on the land. With the construction halted and most of the junk hauled off, I could finally assess the damage. The fire pit was gone. Half the wildflower berm was just gravel. Ruts scarred the earth where trucks had rolled in without permission. It felt like someone had carved their initials into my front teeth. Devin, to his credit, kept his word. A crew arrived one morning with a detailed landscaping plan. Restoration using local flora, a small privacy fence extension, and a brand new fire pit crafted from locally sourced stone. "Just making things whole," the foreman said. "Don't shoot us." I watched them work from the porch, cigar in hand, not saying much, just observing, and making sure no one drilled holes for a hidden basketball hoop while I wasn't looking. That week, Eli came by with a USB drive and a grin that was all teeth. "Karen's nephew," he said, "forgot to log out of his cloud account on the public library computer." What we found wasn't just emails, it was video logs, voice memos, photos of Karen's whiteboard covered in arrows, names, dates, and one particularly damning post-it that read, "Cover paper trail. Alt notary?" The best part, a folder titled Talking Points that included phrases like, "He's unstable, possibly armed, and just wants attention." It was their propaganda strategy written out like a bad student playbook. We passed it all to Jenna, who made sure it was routed to the right authorities. The final nail came 2 days later when a process server knocked on Karen's door during a live HOA board live stream. They'd gone digital, no doubt to control the narrative, but the video kept rolling as she opened the door, took the envelope, read the first few lines, and muttered, Oh, Cut to black. By now, most of the board had resigned. The remaining members were scrambling to call an emergency election. The neighborhood was in chaos. Factions formed. Old wounds reopened. Suddenly, the lady down the street who used to complain about trash cans on the curb was accusing Karen of abusing executive privilege. I couldn't keep track of the drama anymore, but I still kept my cameras rolling. One night, Ghostwatch pinged me. Movement near the edge of the property. I checked the feed. 2 figures in hoodies, one of them holding a gas can. I hit the lights and stepped outside, shotgun slung across my chest. Just held it, didn't raise it. My presence alone did the trick. The figures bolted, but not before I got full facial recognition. HOA sympathizers, according to Eli's running tally. We sent the footage to local PD. The attempted arson charge stuck. The next morning, a patrol car parked at the end of my street. Visibility, they called it. I called it progress. Still, the whole ordeal had carved something into me. I'd fought enemies in deserts and jungles, but this was different. It wasn't life or death, it was something slower, meaner. Bureaucratic warfare in golf cart suburbia. And yet the most unexpected moment came the following Friday. Devin Marshall showed up. No appointment, no letter. Just a black SUV rolling up my drive. He stepped out, alone, no bodyguard, holding a leather folder. "I thought we were done," I said. "We are," he replied, "just one last thing." He handed me the folder. Inside was a letter. Not legal, not formal, just a note. "If you ever want to work with land again, your way, call me. You've got instincts, strategy, backbone. We could use men like you in land advocacy. Real stuff. No HOA bullshit. Think about it." He shook my hand and left without another word. I stood there holding the letter, wondering how the hell I'd gone from property owner minding his own business to poster boy for anti-HOA property rights. And somewhere deep in the woods behind me, Eli laughed as he watched the whole thing from the Ghostwatch drone feed. "Batman with backup," he texted. Damn right. Spring came late that year. The rain lingered heavy and thick, and the mud in my back lot clung to boots like it had something to prove. But when the first crocuses finally broke through the thaw, I knew the worst was behind me. The land healed faster than I expected. Devin's restoration crew had done their job. Native grasses, low shrubs, a fresh border of dogwood and serviceberry. My fire pit stood rebuilt at the old center, ringed with black river stones. There was peace in it, not just visual. Something settled inside me. The HOA was still technically alive, but just barely. After the lawsuit from Marshfield, the criminal fraud investigations, and the resignation of nearly the entire board, what remained was a skeleton crew trying to salvage face by hosting community yoga on the tennis courts. Karen was no longer welcome anywhere near the office. Rumor had it she moved in with a cousin in Arizona to regroup. Last I heard, she was trying to start a podcast about grassroots suburban advocacy. Good luck with that. Miles Hargrove pleaded out. Fined, barred from future board service. Timothy Milner lawyered up, but it didn't save him from a perjury charge. The fake notary scandal was being passed around in legal circles as a case study in what not to do with power and a scanner. Devin, true to his word, went quiet again. Our paths didn't cross, and I didn't call the number on his letter. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a drawer next to my honorable discharge papers in the folder labeled Never Again, which now held printed screenshots of every HOA violation report I'd ever received in my life. Eli kept coming around. Not every day, but often enough. Sometimes with a bag of burgers, sometimes just to check the cameras. He'd taken to calling himself Junior Recon, and I didn't stop him. I even showed him how to clean a scope, not for war, just for skill. He told me he wanted to study environmental law. I told him to start by learning how to read a deed without flinching. One weekend, he helped me set up a little trail on the far edge of the lot. Nothing fancy, just a winding path through the trees with a sign at the head that read, "Private land. Respected by some, defended by one." A month later, I hosted a cookout. Not a big one. Just a few neighbors who'd stood quiet while everything went to hell and eventually found their voice. One of them brought homemade potato salad. Another offered to pay for half the new fencing. I declined, but thanked her anyway. Someone handed me a beer. I let myself smile. Around dusk, we lit the fire pit. Eli stood nearby, flipping hot dogs like a man on a mission. One of the older guys asked him, "So what are you now, his apprentice or something?" Eli grinned. "Nah, just the neighborhood watchdog." The old guy laughed. "You sure you're not scared of more trouble?" Eli glanced at me, then back at the fire. "If it comes back," he said, "we'll know before it knocks." We sat in silence for a while, watching the flames dance. Above us, Ghostwatch's newest drone buzzed faintly as it circled overhead. Silent, steady, and unseen. Just the way I liked it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt home.